Hi guys, my name is Becca Hillburn and I'm going to be leading one of the courses through Nashville Community Education. I am teaching the Making Comics and Zines class this fall from October 25th through December 6th. In cooperation and collaboration with Nashville Community Education, I'm going to be participating in an interview this evening.
So tell our students more about you.
Well, I am a Nashville area comic artist. I moved here about 5-6 years ago. My specialty is kid-lit comics, and I have traveled across the country attending shows and showing and selling my comics to people all over the U.S.
And what inspired you to go into making comic books?
So, when I was a 13-year-old girl, I was in a Suncoast, so you know this is a dated story, and I saw what was, to me, the most beautiful book I'd ever seen. I'm not even kidding, it's Inuyasha Volume 5. I don't even like Inuyasha, but I really like Rumiko Takahashi's art, and this was the first time I had seen manga ever, and it was certainly the first time I'd seen manga in my very podunk home of Louisiana. So, that kind of set me off on exploring comics, realizing that comics could be for me and comics could be something that I enjoyed. Before then, I'm from a really small town in Louisiana, so my experience with comics was newspaper syndication strips, which are all right, and I read them every day, but I wasn't like passionate about them, and I didn't really want to make them. Archie comics, Marvel and DC stuff that might be sold in our local chain supermarket, and none of those things really appealed to me the way manga appealed to me. I've always enjoyed telling stories, and I've always enjoyed drawing, and I originally thought I was going to go into animation, but after Disney did their first 2D purge in like 2004, I decided that I should probably pick a line of work where I get to control more of my own destiny. And I know it's kind of ironic that I picked comics, but I did.
So what type of training do you believe a comic artist should have, if any?
I know a lot of comic artists, and their training and even their skill level vary all across the board. I know people who have not taken any art classes at all, do not have any sort of art background, and they enjoy making comics, and they enjoy drawing comics, and they enjoy reading comics. And I know people who have multiple degrees in art, degrees in fine art, and they also enjoy making comics. I think realistically, if you cannot afford that kind of education, which is understandable, a lot of people can't, you should be self-motivated. There's loads of resources in your community. There's loads of resources available to you through local colleges, even if you aren't a student. And there's so many wonderful resources online that if you really want to learn how to make comics, the door is open to you. You just need to start Googling. You need to just start asking people. So, do I think anyone needs to have a baseline? No. Anyone who is interested in drawing comics, anyone who's interested in making comics, anyone who has a story to tell, and even can draw a stick figure. I mean, one of the most popular web comics, XKCD, is drawn entirely in stick figures. Another hugely popular web comic, Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal. I mean, he has a base level of skill, but he's certainly not famous for his art. I mean, heck, Ryan North's dinosaur comics, which were hugely popular, he's gone on to write for like Marvel and DC. He writes Squirrel Girl now, and it was like clip art of dinosaurs interacting with each other. So in terms of drawing ability, you can have no drawing ability and still make comics. I mean, people are basically making sequential art using emojis all the time. So I think if you have a passion and you want to pursue it as a hobby, then you really don't need a baseline of education. I think you just need to read a lot of comics, talk to a lot of comic people, and start making, because that's kind of the best way to learn how to make comics, is to do it.
What do you think the trends are in the current comic industry?
So I have always been in the indie comic sphere. I've never really been involved in the superhero comic sphere, but I can say that across the board, diversity and inclusivity seem to be the way we're going. When I was growing up, comics were mostly for white guys, and there's still definitely comics for white guys, but now there's so many more voices that have found a platform, from webcomics to self-publishing to making zines and mini comics and selling at shows like Handmade and Bound, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. The barrier of entry for comics, as someone who just enjoys comics and wants to make comics, is really low right now. The door is wide open and it's really accessible, and that's something I'm really delighted to see. Another trend, and I say trend, but I don't want you guys to think I'm saying these are just trendy. I think this is actual growth. Another trend is we're revisiting comics for kids. Not that comics are just for kids, but specifically making comics for kids to enjoy. So the work I do is aimed at kids, and it comes from a background of understanding children's literacy and getting feedback on children's literacy and making comics that support that. But there's lots of publishers have started imprints to do children's comics, and not just like super little kids, but middle schoolers and high schoolers and those who are kids at heart forever. So that's another area of growth that I've noticed. Also, if you want to talk about the lifespan of comics, I think the value in webcomics and indie publishing is at an all-time high right now. It used to be that if you self-published like a perfect bound volume of your comic, it was harder to get people to pick it up. It was harder to get bookstores to carry it, to get libraries to carry it. It was hard to get people to take you seriously. Because it's self-published, not because it's perfect bound. Right, because it's self-published. The binding itself has nothing to do with it. Or like zines, mini comics, floppies, those sort of things. It was really hard to get people to take you seriously, and that is to an extent still the case, but it's getting better every single year. When I first moved to Nashville, I contacted all the librarians in the area, and I let them know that I have a master's in sequential art. I would love to come do workshops for their teens on how to make comics. And it took like 4 years before I met Frank Hand at the Nashville Public Library and was able to do some workshops for him. But there was a lot of resistance there, and now I do shows in the greater Nashville area, and there are more librarians, especially kids and teen librarians, who are really excited about what I'm doing. So I'm seeing comics become more mainstream. It's no longer like a niche hobby. It's something that all sorts of people can enjoy, and I think that's because of the diversity in comics, that there are stories in comics for anyone. If you dig hard enough, you can find a comic for you that specifically suits your needs. And I think that's wonderful, because I grew up at a time where when girls were included in media, we were the sidekick or we were the love interest. So it's really nice to be able to go out and find comics that reflect the sort of stories I want to see, and it's really cool to tell the kind of stories I want to tell and know that I'll be able to find an audience for it.
Can you tell us about some of your favorite comic artists and books?
Oh my gosh. So, I kind of gave you guys a taste earlier that I really love manga. I love those sort of stories. I love slice of life. I love everyday occurrences. I love unusual circumstances and unusual people. I love usual people and unusual circumstances. I really enjoy the stark black and white. I like the art style in general. There are very few manga styles that I don't like. I'm currently reading Dr. Slump, which I'm reading through the Nashville Public Library because they actually have a nice collection of Dr. Slump, the thick tankobon books.
The artist is Akira Toriyama.
Yes,
right?
Akira
Is he
Toriyama.
also the writer?
Yes, all inclusive there. That's something else I really like about manga in general in the U.S. So many of like superhero comics have like 16 people. It seems like really like 4. Like you've got your penciler, you've got your inker, you've got your writer, you've got your letterer, you've got your colorist. But with manga,
artist,
your cover
editor.
artist. That's true. The list goes on forever. But with manga, you'll get a writer and an artist, and you'll get the editor. And to be fair, like a lot of mangaka have like a lot of assistants, like 5 assistants, but for me, they're telling their own stories for the most part, and they're telling the sort of stories they think will sell, or the sort of stories they want to exist in this world. So for me, it's easier for me to find a connection. But I am also really involved in the webcomic sphere, and I'm part of a webcomic collective in Drop Cafe, and I'm really excited about all of their comics as well. So something that is kind of unusual for webcomics is that a lot of us still use pen names, because a lot of us come from the generation where you don't attach your given name to online things. So if I throw out names, it's going to be web handles. But Ellie of the Stars is a beautiful color digital art comic. It's a web comic, so you guys are free to read it. Drawn by Shunabi. Linked is a fun, not quite high fantasy, like middle fantasy, I guess, comic about deep dwelling magic within people by Kabocha. We have a beautiful retelling of Peter Pan in a manga format by Elaine Tipping. We have a really cool fantasy comic, Spider Silk, which is about like, oh shoot, mercenary who ends up joining this thieves guild, but it's not, all is not as it seems, and it's really fun and quirky and humorous. Oh shoot, let's see, we also have Galebound by Rez Pihil, which is, I kind of get like Full Metal Alchemist vibes from it, where it's like 2 dudes off to have a magic adventure, and there's a lot of intrigue. So those are just some of the comics that I'm reading right now. I'm also really into Moteki, and again by Mitsuru Kubo, the character designer, and I believe she's also the writer for Yuri on Ice. And then I'm always a fan of anything Naoki Urasawa does. A lot of things Inio Asano does, but he's done some really questionable stuff, so it's hard for me to want to connect myself with that. And then I'm also just a big fan of kidlit comics, so like, of course, anything Raina Telgemeier does, so Smile and Drama and Ghosts. Anything Zach Gialongo does. First Second is putting out a lot of really good informational comics that are entertaining and educational. So those seem like a really good fit for schools. And they're also just really enjoyable. If you like nonfiction and you want to read nonfiction comics, those can be great.
You also talk about Genji Ito a fair amount.
I do. Genji Ito is like the king of horror comics. I really love well-done horror comics. I prefer to read my horror. I don't like watching it. I like to have a more active role in it. I like to control the pace.
So what is the beginning process of planning a comic book?
So, I don't necessarily... This is a complicated question, because comic books can be a lot of different things. You can have like a floppy, which could be like 32 pages of comic, and so that could be like a chapter. Or it can be 4 short stories, or what have you. When I am planning most of my comic projects, it also depends. Am I planning this to pitch to someone else to publish? Am I planning this for an anthology? If that's the case, I'll write an anthology. I'll write a synopsis. I'll write a pitch for it, explain the art style I have in mind, and I may even throw in some sample art so they get an idea of it. But if it's my own long-form project, which is the kidlit comic I'd mentioned earlier, I have this synopsis doc, where a synopsis is like an overview of the whole story, and it's not in it's not in great detail, because you don't want to get bogged down in detail.
And it's strictly prose? It
is strictly prose, yeah. And I will break that into chapter chunks, and then I'll work on those chapter chunks in script format. And I actually can show you guys what I'm talking about, because I have the script, and well, this is like the Bible for chapter 8. This is everything I have for chapter 8. So if you want to come over, I even include like critique notes, and I'm a physical person, so I still work with physical format. So okay, so this would be like the synopsis. I start with this, and then I start fleshing it out into the script. And generally my script begins with a synopsis that I then break down into like individual pages. So what's in italics is all stuff from the original synopsis. And so I do that for the whole chapter, and I make sure that each page page is on a new physical page. And then I start breaking it down into tiers. So a tier would be like this. Right here is a tier. Everything up here is a tier. So I break it into tiers, and then I break it into panels. And my script is a little bit tighter than a lot of writer-artist scripts, because I'm a writer more than I'm an artist. I mean, I draw, but like I think like a writer. I don't think visually. So it really helps me to put as much information as I can in my script. If I were doing this with another artist, I would really try to keep their preferences in mind and just be respectful of how they like to work as well, since it is a partnership. Once I've finished writing my entire script, I send it off to a couple of people to proofread it, but what they're not reading for grammatical errors, they're reading for tone, they're reading for story clarity, they're reading to see if the sequence of events is interesting and makes logical sense. After I've sent that out and gotten corrections, I start doing what are called layouts. And that's this here. Every page, that's why I have each comic page on a new page, so I have room to do layouts. And these are just so that I can get staging for the characters. And then I do thumbnails. My thumbnails are unusual in that they are actually very tight. So thumbnails are just a small version of your page, so you can get an idea for how your whole chapter is going to look. And we're not really going for like like correct anatomy. We're really going for like gesture. We're going for expression, but we're not even going for super tight. It just needs to be understandable. And I will scan this.
There's no dialogue in that.
No, I don't write any dialogue. I do know people who include dialogue in their thumbnails so they can appropriately plan for dialogue, and I think that's an excellent idea. And I'm actually working on another comic project where I do put my dialogue in at the, like, that's the first thing I place, because it's a recipe comic, so obviously the dialogue / text is the most important thing. So once I finish all of my thumbnails, I do this in a chapter batch. Some artists they'll work from thumbnail all the way to finished page. Those are the sort of people who do like a page or two updates every week for their webcomic. Some people will do their whole book in thumbnail and then send that to their editor. So really, the stages of how you make comics are all about what works for you and what kind of project and the people you're working with. So
most people just start by writing it out like you do.
I know a lot of artists who will start by thumbnailing it out and they don't ever write until the dialogue stage. I don't understand how they can do that, but it is a valid method. So if that's how you make comics, that is legit. But for my class, I'm going to show you guys how I do it, and then you can decide for yourselves whether or not that method works for you or not. So when I finish the thumbnails, then I do roughs.
Well, it asks how you start making a comic, not how you completely make a comic.
Oh, this is still the start. Okay, so from thumbnails, then I do roughs. And this is where I do the figure drawing, and this is where I do perspective. But you know what? Honestly, while these are skills that are useful for me, not every comic artist utilizes these skills in the same way. I know people who don't know how to do a perspective grid, don't know how to do perspective, and they can still do beautiful comics. So it's really about, what kind of comic you want to do and how good you are at eyeballing things. I'm terrible at eyeballing things, so I have to do perspective grids. So that is how I start doing a comic.
And if I were making a digital comic, I would start in the same way?
Yeah. You could, except you'd be doing it digitally in your graphics program of choice. I like to use Photoshop. I have a Surface Pro. I draw just directly on the screen, and that's really easy for me. Yeah, you'd be doing it pretty much the same way if that's, how you wanted to make comics.
So what tips do you have to someone who's nervous about starting comics?
Oh, my goodness. I want y'all not to be nervous. I understand being nervous, because I get nervous about all kinds of things all the time, even things that don't make other people nervous. I get nervous sometimes, so sometimes you can't control that, but try to see your nervousness is excitement. This is a new journey. This is a new skill set. This is a new voice for you. This is a new way for you to communicate with people, and this is a new way for you to express yourself. Some of us have this story that's been bubbling inside us for 10 years. This is your chance to tell that story. Some of us don't have that story, but we have a really amusing cat or a really amusing dog, or our kid is at that age where they're super cute, and we want to record some of that. And we want to do it more than just using our phone or using a camcorder. We want to do it in a personal way that we can leave for our kid. Or maybe we like to journal and we want to start adding artwork to our journal. Or maybe we have all these recipes and we want to share those recipes, and we want to share them in a way that isn't just video or isn't just photos. Or maybe we already like to draw and we just want to compile this into something that we can share with other people. Comics and zines are a wonderful form of communication that allows the person you're communicating to consume it, to absorb your message at their own pace. Comics are persuasive. Comics are eloquent. Comics combine words and poetry and language and dialogue with beautiful art, with something you created with your own two hands. And even art that is less refined or naive, or some might even say childish, is charming because somebody put enough love and time into what they were doing to draw that. And as a comic artist, I know how long that takes. I know how long it takes, how much love you have to have for it, for you to erase it and redraw it and erase it and redraw it. And I have so much respect for people who are beginning their journey into comics at any phase of life, because you're never too old to start drawing comics. You're never too old to find a new love. I have so much respect for those people, because when I started, I was a 13-year-old kid. I had and I didn't have internet, and I wasn't allowed to just watch TV all day. So I had infinite amount of time to pour into learning something new. But when you're picking up comics at 20, or you're picking up comics at 25 or 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, however old you are, you don't necessarily have as much time as a 13-year-old kid with nothing better to do. And I have so much respect for those who it's important enough that they're going to carve out that time. So I hope my passion can help make you feel less nervous, and I hope it doesn't make you feel more nervous. I hope I'm not putting pressure on you. But I'm here to help you out. I am here to share what I know. I'm here to encourage you and inspire you and help you solve your comic problems. And hopefully I'm here to help you fall in love with comics too. As much as maybe not as much as I love them, because I love them like a crazy amount. But at least to start that new love, to start that new passion, because that's one of the greatest gifts that can be given to a comic artist or to a teacher, is that you have inspired a new lifelong love.
And where can we sign up for the class?
Oh, you can sign up for the class through Nashville Community Education. There is going to be a link in the description below for my class, so you just click there to register through that portal. And I really hope I will see you guys on October 25th. Unfortunately, our class size is limited. I think we can have up to 25 people, and unfortunately it is adults only, because this is Nashville Community Adult Education. But if you like the cut of my jib, if you want to see more of me, you can request more of me at the Nashville Public Library, or I know Nashville's Parks does a summer camp program. You can let them know that your kids would be interested in that as well. But this class is specifically for adults to learn how to make comics.
And where can we find your work if we want to see what kind of things we'll be making in your class?
Well, my YouTube channel is a wonderful place to start, because I'm going to be sharing a lot of tutorials there to help people. So I have 6 classes. Each class is 2 hours each, which I know sounds like a lot, but I am covering a lot. I'm covering writing for comics and planning for comics, character design, figure drawing, environment design, a little bit perspective, constructing and doing the composition for a comic page, telling a story. I'm doing a lot in 6 weeks, so I'm really relying on the fact that I have a really large backlog of tutorials to sort of help me teach you guys and help answer questions, and that way we can spend class time covering stuff that in a little more depth, because you guys will have already had a chance to kind of familiarize yourselves with that information. So you can find lots of great stuff on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/nattosoup, NATTOSOUP. You can also find loads of really good tutorials over on my blog. I've been working on that thing for like 10 years. There's so much good information there. I have an Intro to Comic Craft series that should be a great starting point for you. And you can find that at nattosoup.blogspot.com. And you're just going to look, there's like a left-hand sidebar. You're just going to look for the Intro to Comic Craft series there. I will also be at Handmaiden Bound, which is now part of the Southern Festival of Books in the middle of this month. If you want to come by, say hi, kind of get a feel for my personality before you commit to the class, flip through my books, check out the minis, because I'm going to have a lot of minis there, and that'll kind of give you a good idea of just some of the kind of minis you could be making. I will also say that we're about to embark on Inktober. As October starts, Inktober is a month-long inking challenge. I highly recommend those of you who are interested in taking my class, if you don't already have some art that you want to put into a book, like maybe you do botanical studies and you're taking this class so that you can learn how to format those into a zine, that's awesome. If you want to make a comic, that's awesome too. I promise I'll walk you through that. But if, let's say, you participate in Inktober and you do an ink drawing every day for October, that is a fantastic thing to walk into my class with, because we know for a fact that you're going to have at least one zine for our zine exchange at the end of the class, because we can do something with your Inktober drawings. But we will also have an entire semester together where we can do a whole nother project, so that you might even have 2 zines or mini comics for the exchange. So if you have the time, if you have the interest, I highly recommend you consider doing some sort of daily challenge where you're drawing something, or you're painting something, or you're inking something, so we can start the class on a really strong foot.
Okay, well, thanks, Becca. We'll see you at the Nashville Community Education Center.
All right, thank you guys so much. I hope to see you guys on October 25th. Class is Thursdays from 6 to 8 p.m. down at the Cone School. Bye, guys.